Welcome everybody, my name is Tim Sandy and I'm a VMware Systems Engineer that supports Tech Data. In this session we're going to be talking about vSphere 6 and what's been added to it as far as new features as well as what's been improved in some of the pre-existing features. So let's get started. First off, let's talk about some of the features that are brand new to vSphere 6 that were not in the previous 5.x versions. So we'll go ahead and get started with those first. Now, one of the major new additions to vSphere 6 is we now have the capability to go cross vSwitch vMotion. Basically, we can move a VM from one switch type to another. Now, there's two basic switch types. There's a standard and a distributed. And previously, if we had an example, we had two sites with two different configurations, and one had standard switches while the other had distributed switches. We could not vMotion between those two environments because of the different switch types. Now with vSphere 6, we can go ahead and vMotion a virtual machine from a standard to a distributed switch, a standard to a standard, and a distributed to a distributed. Now we still can't go from a distributed to a standard switch, but again, much better than it was before. It gives us much more flexibility between different switch types based upon how you have your environments configured. Now we've also included the ability to do from one vCenter to another vCenter and be able to vMotion between them. Now, in previous 5.x versions, when you had multiple sites with vCenter servers, you cannot vMotion between them. That capability wasn't there. So now with vSphere 6, we can actually go from one vCenter to another vCenter, which is a huge improvement. This is something that a lot of virtual admins have been waiting for a long time to have this capability. It opens up a lot of door for a lot of different use cases to be able to vMotion from one vCenter to another. So if you're a company that has multiple sites and currently are managing them as individual sites because each one has its own vCenter, you can now look at these as more of one site and be able to manage it as such and be able to vMotion between those environments, which is a huge leap forward. Now, tied in with this capability of switch to switch and also vCenter to vCenter, we also have made the improvement to where we can also do what's called long distance vMotion. Now, what that gives us the capability to do is previously in 5.x versions, we had a 5 millisecond round trip time for communication in order to give us the capability to be able to vMotion. Well, that is very hard to do over any type of distance. Now with vSphere 6, we need 100 milliseconds, which opens up the capability of a lot longer distances. So now we can be able to vMotion a machine between different vCenter environments, but over very long distances, including across the country or even across different continents, as long as we have that 100 millisecond round trip time. So now this opens up, again, a lot more use cases. For example, you can use it for a DR plan. So if you have multiple physical sites across the country or around the world, you can, instead of having to have a strictly DR site, you could actually configure it to where the other site becomes essentially your DR site as well, because you can do this long distance vMotion. So it opens up a lot of capabilities, a lot of use cases, and this has been something that's been waiting, that a lot of virtual admins have been waiting for a very long time. So a huge announcement around this. Next, something that was not in previous versions of vCenter is we now have the Platform Services Controller, or the PSC. This actually houses our single sign-on, our licensing, as well as certificates, all into one essential service-based offering in one particular appliance. Now, this gives us the ability to, again, because of the cross vCenter and long-distance vMotion capabilities, we can now start connecting sites together to manage them as a whole instead of individual sites. So this gives us the capability to have one single sign-on server, have environments point to that, as well as manage all your licensing, as well as all your certificates for your virtualized environment. So now it gives us, again, much greater manageability from one central place, and again, just opens up a lot more doors. So this is also another huge improvement that we have. As you can see here, you can either do an embedded database or an external database, depending on what your needs are. Next is virtual volumes, or vVols, as you may have heard it called. Virtual volumes gets a little bit into the technical side, but to put it simply, when you're connecting to storage, your hosts to your storage, which is where all of your virtual machines files are located at, typically on a SAN or a NAS. This takes work between your virtualized admins as well as your storage admins and working together to present the particular ones that those VMs are on your SAN or NAS so that the vSphere host can see them, connect to them, and then that way, again, you can talk across between the host and your storage. Now with vVols, we have just made this easier, less work for both the virtual and the storage admins. And basically what it's doing is virtualizing that storage device such as a SAN or a NAS. By virtualizing it, it gives us much more flexibility, easier to set up. Again, we can do more profile-based automation, and again, we can just make sure that everything is done much simpler, much easier, with less effort, and then ensuring that we're also making uniformity across, because again, you can attach profiles to this. So again, it just makes our life much easier for your storage and virtual admins. Next, another long-awaited improvement that we were looking for is that we've added graphical acceleration card support. So many of you may have heard of the NVIDIA Grid K1 or K2 cards, as well as some Intel cards. So now we have support for these type of cards in the vSphere host. These graphic acceleration cards go into your host, and by doing this now, we have our Horizon View desktops, which before were limited into any type of graphic intensive type processing that they could do. So anybody that was wanting to have View desktops, but they also need to be able to run very graphic intensive type rendering, such as 3D rendering rather. If you look at applications such as CAD design applications, Google Earth, or maybe even video games, typically those were not able to be processed on a virtual desktop. They just couldn't keep up with the graphics demands. So now with being able to put these graphics acceleration cards in the vSphere host, we can now be able to have View desktops that can run very graphic intensive 3D CAD type applications. So this opens up a lot of doors for a lot of departments that are, again, doing this heavy graphics intensive type jobs, and they can still do it on a virtual desktop. They don't have to have a dedicated PC with a dedicated video graphics card. So this is something that has been long awaited, and it is here now. So now is really expanding the capabilities of the virtual desktops to be able to run and really replace the physical desktop completely. So let's talk about the updates to existing technologies within vCenter. So first off, we've had fault tolerance for quite a while now. There was one limitation though. Fault tolerance was limited to only one virtual CPU. So you had a VM that had, say, three vCPUs. You cannot use fault tolerance for that VM to protect it because you had a limitation of it could only have one. Now with vSphere 6, we can go all the way up to 4 vCPUs, and we can now protect those business critical type applications and servers associated, or we couldn't do that before. So again, any of these critical apps such as Exchange, SQL, all of these application servers that could not be fault tolerant protected before, we can now do that because now again we can protect a VM up to 4 vCPUs. Now there are some limitations to the number of VMs and virtual CPUs that you can protect within a host, but just be aware of that and maybe look into that and make sure that you understand that as well. Now, in previous versions of vCenter, we've had 2 different editions. We've had a Windows-based version of vCenter Server and also a appliance-based version. A lot of people like the appliance-based version because it's very quick and easy to deploy. It takes less resources to run than the Windows-based vCenter Server. But there was limitations that the appliance had that the Windows-based server didn't previously. For example, the numbers of VMs that it can handle and its maximums. So now with vSphere 6, our vCenter server, whether it be the Windows-based or the appliance-based vCenter server, they are now completely the same as far as capabilities and maximums associated for both of those. So now you're no longer put in a position where you have to choose between the Windows or appliance-based as to what fits your needs. Either one of them perform the same way, so depending on what you want, you can select either one without any repercussions. That also flows over into the linked mode. Now, linked mode is something that we've had for a while as well. But again, the appliance was not capable of doing linked mode, whereas only the Windows-based vCenter server could before. With vSphere 6, we can now have linked mode and use it for both the Windows and the appliance-based vCenter server. Linked mode is basically you can connect two virtual center servers, and from a virtual admin standpoint, the benefit of that is that I see it as one pane of glass, and I can manage both of those vCenter environments as though it's one. So it makes my job much easier. So a lot of people, especially virtual admins, really like that linked mode, but they were forced to use the Windows-based vCenter server previously. That is no longer the case now. Now, one change to vSphere 6 is we've had the vSphere Data Protection appliance, which is our backup solution. Now, data protection came in two different license models. There's the Data Protection and there's Data Protection Advanced. The Advanced, of course, gave you additional capabilities, such as being able to back up databases for SQL servers, Exchange, and SharePoint, as well as some other advanced features. Now, what we've done is we no longer have the two versions anymore in vSphere 6. We just have vSphere Data Protection. But what we've done is we've taken all the feature sets of the advanced version and rolled it back into just the Data Protection. So now we just have the one version, the Data Protection, but yeah, it has all the features that the advanced did previously. And as long as you purchase Essentials Plus or higher, it comes with Data Protection. So just keep that in mind. Also, our vSphere Replication appliance has been upgraded, and the Replication appliance, what that is used for is when you're using it in conjunction with our vCloud Era DR as a service instance. Again, for the DR capability, it uses the vSphere Replication appliance. Now, previously, it used to use it to initially send over a copy of that VM to the DR as a service instance. But then that was for that initial sync and failover process. But then on the failback, it used to use the vCloud connector server to copy it back to your on-premise. Now with the new version of vSphere Replication, actually the failover process, the initial sync process, as well as the failback process will always occur across that vSphere Replication appliance. And again, vSphere Replication appliance is only used for when you tie together your on-premise as well as your DR as a service instance in the cloud. So the vSphere Replication appliance now also has the ability to tie in with vRealize Orchestrator. This gives you the capability to automate the failover and failback process, which we were unable to do previously because it was a manual process because it did not tie back into vRealize Orchestrator. So that is a new capability now to, again, automate that failover and failback process, which has been a great improvement. The vSphere client has not changed much in regards to the C# client. However, the web-based client has changed quite a bit. Now, one of the problems with the previous versions of the web client was it was a little bit clunky. It didn't perform so great whenever admins were doing tasks. However, with the new vSphere 6 web client, we have done a lot of improvements under the covers and have helped with that performance. We've changed the user interface a little bit, where we have dockable menus, as well as, again, a lot of performance improvements. So no matter what you're doing within that web interface, there has been a lot of performance increases. So your vSphere admins will definitely notice a performance increase and how well that when they're clicking through the interface, things are actually happening much quicker now. So they'll definitely notice that. Now with the C# client, that has not changed much. It's still used for Update Manager to do updates across your vSphere environment. As well as you can use it to also manage an individual host outside of the context of vCenter server. So if, for example, if for some reason your vCenter server was down, you can still connect to the host. You're going to use that using that local C# client. And then versions 10 and 11 of the hardware, you use it to configure those VMs as well. But other than that, that's it for the vSphere client. Essentially, everything is moving over into the web-based interface. Eventually, I'm sure Update Manager will migrate over as well. So that's it for the clients. Now, of course, with any major release of vSphere, there's always going to be maximums that are increased, just like every other time. As you see that we have, at a minimum, doubled our maximums across the board, with the exception of the CPUs per host. That's about 1.5 times, and then everything else is at least 2, all the way up to 4 times greater, depending on what you're talking about. So just to be aware, we have made much of maximum increases. And finally, the last update is with Microsoft Clustering Services. We are now offering support for Windows Server 2012 R2 and SQL 2012 as well, and for always-on availability groups and IP version 6 compatibility as well. And then we've also included some support for using your physical RDMs in regards to your Microsoft clustering as well. So now that completes all of the new and updated feature sets within vSphere 6. I hope this information helps you when you're talking to your partners. Of course, if you have any questions or need any assistance, feel free to reach out to either your sales or technical representatives, such as myself at Tech Data, and we'll be happy to help you with all these different changes with vSphere 6.
Before we complete today's session, I wanted to also mention our VMware Enablement Registration and Calendar page, in case you're not familiar with it. The Enablement and Registration and Event Calendar page, we provide you a registration link, as you see there on the bottom on the left-hand side of the slide, where you can go out, give us some basic information about yourself, as far as what kind of role you're in, your email address, and what kind of enablement sessions you would like to stay attuned with as far as 100, 200, 300 level, based on whether you're sales, technical sales, or engineering. You can select 1, 2, or all 3 of them if you choose. And once you do get registered, that we'll go ahead, we'll get your email address, and then whenever we have upcoming enablement events, we'll go ahead and send out a reminder email of those events to you. And then the second step that you should do is to go out to our event calendar, where we will have these events listed so that you can check your schedule and see which events that you can attend, and you can compare your schedule against our event calendar as well. And one additional note I'd like to mention, in case you're not aware, we also have our Tech Data VMware Training Camp site. And with the Training Camp site, if you haven't already opted in, I do highly recommend that you do that. There's lots of benefits that you can take advantage of, starting with a dedicated training camp coach that will help you grow your VMware business. It provides you advantages such as enablement, free training, possible MDF funds, lead generation opportunities, are just some of the many benefits that it offers you. So be sure to leverage this great resource. And finally, this slide just shows you many of the great resources here at Tech Data that are a part of the training camp team to help you become successful with selling VMware and help you through that training camp process. So I highly recommend that you go out and get registered for our enablement sessions, check the calendar, as well as opt in to the Data Training Camp program. So with that, that completes today's session. I hope this session was informative to you, and I hope to see you come back and watch more of our enablement sessions. Thank you and have a great day.